All right, let's dive into one of the most fascinating rules in history. We're talking about one of the 10 commandments, a rule that, on the surface seems pretty simple. But in reality, it has sparked more arguments, more division, and even more wars than maybe any of the others.
And there it is, the second commandment. At first glance, it feels pretty cut and dry, doesn't it? But wow, these few words have been picked apart, fought over, and have shaped the art and even the worship of major world religions for thousands of years.
Well, not so fast. The second you start to ask, hey, what exactly is a graven image? That's when you fall down one of the biggest theological rabbit holes in all of history. And right off the bat, the first major fight is about whether this is even its own commandment at all. And this isn't just, some minor detail. It completely changes what the rule actually means. So here's how this huge split plays out. On one side, you've got Jewish tradition, most Protestants, and the Orthodox Church. For them, this is commandment number 2, a total blanket ban on making any images. But then, on the other side, you've got Catholics and Lutherans who see it as more of a 1b, just a clarification of the first commandment. For them, it only bans images of pagan gods, which leaves the door open for images of God. This one single difference is the source of centuries of conflict. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we have to understand what the word idol meant back in the ancient world. Trust me, it's a way more powerful and complex idea than how we use the word today. See, an idol wasn't just a statue you looked at. In the ancient world, people believed that after you performed these really elaborate rituals, a part of the god's actual spirit, its presence, would come and live inside the object. It became a physical link, like a vessel, not just a symbol. So before the ritual, it's just a rock. After the ritual, you could call it a god. And these idols came in all shapes and sizes. There were human-shaped ones, which we call anthropomorphic. You had animal-shaped ones, or theriomorphic, kind of like you'd see in ancient Egypt. But it could even be as simple as a symbol, like a sun disk, or even just a rough sacred standing stone called a masabat. Basically, anything could be turned into a home for a god. So this brings us to the big question. Why ban them? I mean, the Bible itself is filled with images for God. God is described as a king, a rock, even a mother. So why is it okay to use those words, but not to create a physical, man-made image? Well, the arguments against idols usually boil down to 3 big problems. First, they try to contain something that's uncontainable. Second, they're really easy for people to manipulate. And third, they almost always end up just reflecting our own biases right back at us. Let's break that down. The first point is all about infinity. When King Solomon is dedicating this massive, glorious temple, he says something amazing. He basically admits, look, not even this incredible building can contain God, so a little statue has no chance. Any physical object is, by its very nature, just too small to hold a limitless being. There's a modern, super memorable way to think about this that really hits the nail on the head. Cats fit in boxes. God does not fit in a box. It's that simple. The moment you try to put God into a fixed physical form, you've already shrunk your vision of what God is. The second big problem is manipulation. I mean, think about the most famous idol story of all time, the golden calf. The Israelites didn't just want an image. They wanted an image they could control. They made a calf, a god form they knew from Egypt, to try and lead them back to Egypt. They were literally trying to make God do what they wanted, to serve their agenda. And that leads right into the third problem. Idols flip the whole relationship backwards. Instead of humans trying to embody God's values, we create an image that embodies our values, right? Is God white or black, male or female, strong and warlike? An idol forces you to pick one, projecting your own limited human ideas onto something that's meant to be infinite. So let's shift gears and look at how this theological debate wasn't just for scholars. It had very real and often very, very violent consequences all throughout history. This commandment has been a flashpoint for literally thousands of years. You see it way back with King Josiah's reforms in ancient Israel. Then, after the exile, this really strict rejection of all representational art became the norm. But then, by the 3rd century, religious images, or icons, start popping up in the Christian church. And this eventually explodes into the Byzantine icon wars. For more than 100 years, the church was violently split between those who defended sacred images and the iconoclasts, which literally means the image breakers, who went around smashing them.
So after centuries of debate and destruction and division over what images are forbidden, the Bible gives us this incredible twist. It reframes the entire conversation by revealing the one image that isn't just allowed but is actually celebrated.
Which brings us to the final crucial question. After everything we've talked about, all the rules and warnings, is there any correct image of God?
The answer is yes, and it's not made of wood or stone. It's us. The Bible's one permitted, celebrated image of God is human beings.
The whole argument here is that the true image of God isn't an object, it's a living being. And this idea is woven throughout the entire Bible. Christians often point to Jesus saying, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." The early church leaders describe believers as being the body of Christ here on earth. This just flips the entire concept of worship on its head. It suggests that the highest form of devotion isn't staring at a statue, it's actively serving the people all around you. The real image to cherish is the one you see in the face of your neighbor. And that leaves us with one last powerful thought to chew on. If this idea is right, if the only true image of the divine is reflected in every single person we meet, how does that change the way we look at and, maybe more importantly, treat one another?